They say the badge is a shield designed to protect the innocent. But for Officer Harlan Voss, that badge was a weapon, and the town of Oak Haven was his hunting ground. He thought he was untouchable. He thought the quiet black teenager sitting in the corner booth of a dusty roadside diner was just another easy target to bully, humiliate, and break. He was wrong. Dead wrong. Voss didn't know that the boy he was about to brutalize wasn't just a student. He was the son of the most feared heavy hitter in the FBI's organized crime division. And he certainly didn't know that the coffee he just spilled was about to start a war that would burn his career, his reputation, and his life to the ground. This isn't just a story about injustice. It's a story about the kind of karma that doesn't just knock, it kicks the door in. The neon sign of Merriweather's Diner buzzed with the annoying, intermittent hum of a dying fly. It was a Tuesday in Oak Haven, a town that sat uncomfortably between the sprawling affluence of the tech suburbs and the rusting decay of the old industrial district. Kai Reid sat in the back booth, the vinyl cracked and taped over with silver duct tape. He was 17, dressed in a muted grey hoodie and clean sneakers, his posture hunched not out of fear, but out of focus. Spread before him were AP calculus homework sheets and a half-eaten slice of cherry pie. Kai was the kind of kid who kept his head down. He was on the track team, played cello in the school orchestra, and had never so much as jaywalked. He was waiting for his father, Vance, who had promised to pick him up after a meeting at the Federal Building downtown. The diner was mostly empty. Behind the counter stood Sophia, a woman in her 60s, with hair the color of cigarette ash and a heart of gold, wiping down the laminate countertop. In the corner, an elderly couple shared a milkshake. It was peaceful. Then the bell above the door jingled, not with a cheerful ring, but with a harsh clatter. Officer Harlan Voss walked in. Voss was a man who took up too much space, and not just physically. He was broad-shouldered with a buzz cut that hadn't changed for years, and a uniform that was slightly too tight around the biceps, a deliberate choice to intimidate. He had been on the Oak Haven force for 15 years, long enough to know exactly which lines he could cross and which judges would look the other way. He was known on the streets as the Hammer, a nickname he had given himself and tried desperately to make stick. He adjusted his belt, the leather creaking loudly in the quiet room, and scanned the diner. His eyes glossed over the elderly couple. They lingered for a second on Sophia, who suddenly found a stain on the counter very interesting. Then they landed on Kai. Kai didn't look up. He was deep in a derivative equation. Voss frowned. He didn't like being ignored. To a man like Voss, lack of acknowledgement was a form of disrespect. He walked over to the counter, his heavy boots thudding against the linoleum. "Coffee, Sophia, black. And make it fresh," Voss commanded, not asking. "Coming right up, Harlan," Sophia said, her voice tight. She poured the mug quickly, her hand trembling slightly. Everyone in Oak Haven knew Voss's temper. He had arrested a librarian for resisting arrest after she disputed a parking ticket. The charges were dropped, but the librarian had moved 2 towns over. Voss took the mug, blowing the steam away, but he didn't sit down. He turned his back to the counter, leaning against it, and stared directly at the teenager in the back booth. "Hey!" Voss barked. Kai didn't hear him. He had one earbud in, playing lo-fi beats to help him concentrate. Voss's jaw tightened. He walked over to the booth, his shadow falling across Kai's calculus homework. He tapped the table with his knuckles. Hard. Rap, rap, rap. Kai jumped, his pen skidding across the paper. He pulled the earbud out and looked up, blinking. "Oh, sorry, officer. I didn't hear you." "Didn't hear me," Voss repeated, his voice dripping with mock confusion. "Or didn't want to listen." "I was just doing homework, sir," Kai said, his voice steady but polite. He had been given the talk by his father a dozen times. "Be polite. Keep your hands visible. Don't argue. Survive." "Homework," Voss sneered, looking at the complex equations. "Looks like gibberish to me." "You go to Northside High?" "Yes, sir." "Northside gets out early. Why aren't you home?" "My dad is picking me up, sir. He's on his way." Voss took a slow sip of his coffee. his eyes narrowing. He didn't like the kid's calmness. He wanted fear. He wanted a stutter. Loitering is a crime in this town, son. We've had reports of drug activity in this diner, kids passing baggies under the tables. Sophia spoke up from the counter, unable to help herself. Harlan, leave the boy alone. He's been here eating pie. He's fine. Voss whipped his head around, pointing a thick finger at her. Stay out of police business, Sophia, unless you want a health inspector crawling through that kitchen tomorrow morning. Sophia went pale and looked down. Voss turned back to Kai, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. Stand up, son. I haven't done anything, Kai said, his heart beginning to hammer against his ribs. He glanced at his phone on the table. No texts from Dad yet. I said stand up, Voss said, his hand drifting dangerously close to the baton on his belt. I want to see what's in those pockets. Kai took a breath. Am I being detained, officer? Because if not, I'd like to finish my homework. It was the wrong thing to say. It was the right thing legally, but to a tyrant like Voss, it was a declaration of war. The air in the diner seemed to vanish, replaced by a thick, suffocating tension. The elderly couple in the corner hurriedly dropped a $20 bill on the table and shuffled out the door, heads down, terrified to witness what was coming. Voss laughed, a dry barking sound. A lawyer, huh? We got a jailhouse lawyer here. He slammed his coffee mug down on the table. Hot liquid sloshed out, soaking the edge of Kai's calculus worksheet. The dark stains spread rapidly across the paper, ruining hours of work. Kai looked at the paper, then back at Voss. A flash of teenage annoyance broke through his composure. You ruined my homework, and I'm about to ruin your afternoon if you don't get your ass out of that booth, Voss growled. Stand up now. Kai slowly slid out of the booth. He was tall, nearly 6 feet, actually an inch taller than Voss, though much slimmer. This height difference seemed to agitate the officer even more. Kai kept his hands open and at his sides. Turn around. Hands on the table, Voss ordered. Officer, I really think we should wait for my father. I don't give a damn about your father, Voss shouted, losing his temper. Turn around. Kai turned, placing his hands on the sticky table. Voss patted him down roughly. He shoved his hands into Kai's hoodie pocket, pulling out a wallet and a house key. He threw them on the table. Then he checked the back pockets. Nothing. Clean, Kai said quietly. Can I sit down now? Voss was red in the face. He had caused a scene, terrified the waitress, and found absolutely nothing. His ego was bruising, and he needed a win. He needed a reason. He grabbed Kai's backpack from the seat. Hey, you can't search that without a warrant or probable cause, Kai said, turning his head. I smell marijuana, Voss lied. It was a practiced lie, one he had used 1,000 times. That's probable cause. Smells like a skunk farm in here. I don't smoke. Sophia knows I don't smoke, Kai pleaded, desperation creeping into his voice. Voss unzipped the bag and dumped it upside down. Textbooks, a TI-84 calculator, a gym uniform, and a pencil case clattered onto the floor. No drugs, no weapons, just the mundane belongings of an honor roll student. Voss kicked the pile of books. Where is it? Where did you hide it? There is nothing, Kai shouted, stepping back. Stop kicking my stuff. Resisting, Voss yelled. It was the magic word. Voss lunged. He grabbed Kai by the lapels of his hoodie and slammed him backward against the booth. Kai's head snapped back, hitting the wood paneling with a sickening thud. Harlan, stop! Sophia screamed, reaching for the phone behind the counter. Put the phone down, Sophia! Voss roared without looking back. He spun Kai around, twisting the boy's arm behind his back with excessive force. Kai cried out in pain as his shoulder joint was pushed to its limit. Stop fighting! Stop resisting! Voss screamed for the benefit of the security camera he knew didn't work. I'm not fighting! Kai gasped, tears of pain welling in his eyes. Voss swept Kai's legs out from under him. Kai hit the hard linoleum floor face first, his nose cracking against the tiles. Blood instantly began to pool under his face. Voss dropped his knee into the center of Kai's back, the breathless zone, pinning him with 200 pounds of pressure. Kai wheezed, struggling to inhale. "You want to be a tough guy," Voss hissed into Kai's ear, the smell of stale coffee and tobacco on his breath. "You want to quote laws to me. I am the law." He grabbed his handcuffs. Click, click. Kai lay on the diner floor, blood dripping from his nose, his arm throbbing, humiliated and terrified. "Get up." Voss yanked him up by the chain of the handcuffs, dragging him toward the door. Kai stumbled, dizzy from the blow to his head. As Voss shoved him through the door and toward the squad car, a black SUV with tinted windows turned the corner and cruised slowly down the street. It was looking for a parking spot. Inside that SUV was Special Agent Vance Reid. He was listening to a podcast on criminal psychology, humming along, thinking about taking his son out for steaks to celebrate his upcoming SATs. He saw the flashing lights of the cruiser parked in front of the diner. He saw a police officer shoving a handcuffed teenager against the hood of the car. Vance squinted. "That kid has a grey hoodie like Kai's," he thought. Then the kid turned his head, and Vance saw the blood on his face. Vance slammed on the brakes in the middle of the road. The tires screeched, leaving black rubber on the asphalt. He didn't park. He threw the SUV into park in the middle of the traffic lane and kicked his door open. Vance Reid was not a man who yelled. He was a man who whispered, and people leaned in to listen because they were afraid of what would happen if they missed a word. He was 6'2", wore a bespoke suit that cost more than Voss's car, and carried himself with the lethal grace of a predator. He walked toward the scene, his FBI credentials already in his hand. His eyes locked on Voss like a missile acquiring a target. Voss was busy reading Kai his rights, roughly patting his head to shove him into the back seat. "You have the right to remain silent." "Officer." Vance's voice cut through the air. It wasn't loud, but it carried a frequency of command that made Voss freeze. Voss turned, annoyed. "Back off, citizen. This is an active crime scene. Move your vehicle, or I'll have it towed." Vance didn't stop walking until he was 3 feet from Voss. He looked at Kai in the back seat, bleeding, crying, terrified. Then he looked at Voss. "That," Vance said, his voice terrifyingly calm, "is my son." Voss scoffed, looking Vance up and down. He saw a well-dressed black man and made another assumption. "Yeah, well, you should have raised him better. He's a drug dealer, and he assaulted a police officer." Vance stared at him. The silence stretched for seconds. "Open the door," Vance said. "I'm not opening anything. He's being processed. Step back, or you're joining him." Voss put his hand on his taser. Vance slowly reached into his jacket pocket. Voss flinched, drawing his taser. "Hands. Let me see hands." Vance moved with agonizing slowness. He pulled out a leather wallet, flipped it open, and held it up. The gold badge gleamed in the afternoon sun. But it wasn't a local police shield. It was the eagle of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. "Special Agent in Charge Vance Reid," he said. "Organized Crime Division. Put that taser away before you make the last mistake of your career." Voss squinted at the badge. His stomach dropped. "FBI. He assaulted me," Voss stammered, his confidence cracking, but his arrogance trying to hold it together. He resisted. "We'll see," Vance said. "Get your supervisor down here now, and if you touch my son again, God help you." Voss sneered. "Feds don't have jurisdiction over municipal arrests, Agent. He's going to the station. You can follow if you want, but he's mine for the next 24 hours. Voss slammed the car door shut, got into the driver's seat, and peeled away. Sirens wailing, leaving Vance standing in the street, his hands clenched into fists so tight his knuckles turned white. Vance pulled out his phone. He didn't dial 911. He dialed a number from memory. "Director Ryder," Vance said, his voice ice cold. "I need a team in Oak Haven immediately." "No, not a case. It's personal. Someone just declared war." The Oak Haven police precinct smelled of floor wax, stale donuts, and despair. It was a smell that Officer Harlan Voss usually relished. It was the scent of his kingdom. But today, As he marched Kai Reid through the back entrance, the air felt thin. Voss's mind was racing. FBI. The letters burned in his brain. He had expected a neglectful parent, maybe a single mum working 2 jobs who wouldn't have the time or money to fight a resisting arrest charge. He hadn't expected a special agent in a $3,000 suit. He shoved Kai into the processing room. "Sit!" he barked. Kai sat on the metal bench, holding his wrist. It was swelling rapidly, turning a sickly shade of purple. His nose had stopped bleeding, but his shirt was ruined, stained with rust-colored splotches. He was trembling, not just from pain, but from the adrenaline crash. Name. The booking sergeant, a weary man named Thorne, grunted without looking up. "Kai Reid," Kai whispered. "Louder!" Voss shouted, slamming his hand on the counter. "Kai Reid." Thorne looked up, eyeing the boy's injuries. He looked at Voss, then at the paperwork. "Rough resisting charge, Harlan. Kid went crazy." Voss lied smoothly, his heartbeat finally slowing down. He was committed now. There was no going back. If he admitted he messed up, he'd be suspended. If he stuck to the lie, it was his word against a kid's. "Swung at me. Had to subdue him. I think he's on something. Meth, maybe. Dust." Kai's eyes went wide. "I've never taken drugs in my life. You searched me. You found nothing." "Shut up." Voss pointed a finger in his face. "I found drug paraphernalia in your bag. Baggies. Residue. You're lying." Kai gasped, realizing the depth of the nightmare he was in. "There was nothing in my bag but books." Voss turned his back to Kai, winking at Thorne. "Must have fallen out in the struggle. I'll go back to the scene and find it later." Thorne paused. He knew Voss. He knew the game, but he also had a mortgage. He sighed and typed into the computer. Possession of paraphernalia. Assault on a police officer. Resisting arrest. Print him. Voss ordered. As Kai was forced to press his ink-stained fingers onto the card, tears finally spilled over. He felt dirty, criminal. The flash of the mugshot camera blinded him, capturing his swollen nose and terrified eyes, an image that would soon become famous, though Voss didn't know it yet. Meanwhile, in the parking lot of the diner, the atmosphere was electric. Vance Reid hadn't moved his SUV. He sat inside, the engine idling, surrounded by the silence of a predator preparing to strike. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't speeding to the station to bang on the doors like a panicked father. He was a strategist. He had his phone on speaker. On the other end was Derek Sloan, one of the most vicious civil rights defense attorneys in the state. Sloan was expensive, abrasive, and hated cops. He was perfect. He took him to the Oak Haven precinct. Sloan's voice rasped over the line. "Yes, Oak Haven PD, Officer Voss." "Derek, listen to me," Vance said, his voice dropping an octave. "They are going to process him. They are going to try to intimidate him into a confession. I need you there 10 minutes ago. I'm already in the car. Vance, I'm doing 80 on the freeway, but tell me, how bad is it?" He busted the kid's nose, maybe a fractured wrist, and Derek. Vance watched a local tow truck pull up to move his SUV. He waved the driver away with a flash of his badge through the window. "I want this scorched earth. I don't just want the charges dropped. I want this officer's life dismantled. I want his pension. I want his badge. I want his freedom." "Understood," Sloan said. "What about the bureau?" "I called Director Ryder. He's sending a forensic team. We're going to audit the entire department. If this guy did this to my son, he's done it before. I want to find the others." Vance hung up. He looked at the diner. Sophia, the waitress, was standing by the window, wiping her eyes with a rag. Vance stepped out of the car and walked to the diner door. He needed evidence before it disappeared. Sophia opened the door before he could knock. "You're the father?" she asked, her voice shaking. "I am," Vance said gently. "Mom, did you see what happened?" "I saw it all," Sophia said, sniffing. "That man, Harlan, he's a monster. He bullies everyone. Your boy was just doing math." Did you see any drugs? Lord, no. Just cherry pie. Sophia, Vance said, looking up at the corners of the room. Does that camera work? Sophia hesitated. The owner. He says it loops every 24 hours, but he's scared of Voss. He might delete it if Harlan comes back. Vance pulled out a business card. I need that footage right now. Can you access it? It's in the back office. The password is on a sticky note. Show me, Vance said. I'm deputizing you as a witness for the Federal Bureau of Investigation. That means if anyone, including Officer Voss, tries to stop you or threaten you, they are committing a federal felony. Sophia straightened up, finding courage she didn't know she had. Come on back. 10 minutes later, Vance walked out of the diner with a USB drive in his pocket. He had the video. He watched it once on the security monitor. It was worse than he thought. The kick to the back, the twisting of the arm, the planting of the seed of the lie. Vance got back into his SUV. He gripped the steering wheel. Okay, Harlan, he whispered to the empty car. Let's play. The lobby of the Oak Haven police station was quiet until the double doors swung open with the force of a hurricane. Derek Sloan swept in, wearing a suit that cost more than the front desk sergeant made in a year. He carried a leather briefcase like a battering ram. Behind him walked Vance Reid, looking less like a father and more like an executioner. Sergeant Thorne looked up from his crossword puzzle. Can I help you folks? My client, Sloan announced, his voice booming off the tiled walls, is a minor named Kai Reid. You are holding him unlawfully. I am his counsel. I want to see him immediately. And if you have questioned him without a parent or attorney present, I will have your badge for a coaster. Thorne blinked. He's in holding. Officer Voss is writing up the report. Get Voss out here, Vance said. His voice was low, but it carried across the room. And tell Chief Ryder to join us. The chief is gone for the day, Thorne stammered. Call him back, Vance said. He placed his FBI credentials on the high counter. The gold shield clattered loudly. Tell him the FBI is seizing evidence regarding a civil rights violation occurring in his jurisdiction. Thorne went pale. He picked up the phone. He picked. 5 minutes later, the heavy door to the back buzzed open. Voss walked out. He had washed his face and practiced his smirk in the mirror. He wasn't going to let these suits intimidate him. This was his house. You the dad? Voss asked, looking at Vance. Look, your kid has behavioral issues. We found residue in his bag. He resisted. It's a standard. Shut your mouth, Sloan snapped. I am Derek Sloan. Unless you want to add violating the Sixth Amendment to your list of crimes today, do not speak to my client's father. You speak to me. Voss laughed, a nervous hacking sound. Lawyers. Look, he's being processed. You can bail him out in an hour when the paperwork is done. I'm not here for bail, Vance said, stepping around Sloan. He locked eyes with Voss. I'm here for you. Voss stepped up, puffing his chest out. Is that a threat? Because in this town, you're just a tourist. It's a promise, Vance replied. Suddenly, the side door opened. Chief Ryder, a red-faced man with a comb-over and a tie loosened at the collar, burst in. He looked from Voss to Vance to the badge on the counter. What the hell is going on here? Ryder demanded. I'm trying to eat dinner, and I get told the feds are invading my lobby. Chief Ryder, Vance said, turning his attention to the boss. Your officer here assaulted a minor, my son. He caused bodily harm without cause. He falsified a reason for the stop. He resisted, Voss interjected quickly, and he had drugs. Show us the drugs, Sloan challenged. Produce the evidence right now. It's being logged, Voss lied. I have video. Vance dropped the bomb. The silence in the lobby was absolute. Voss's eyes flickered. He hadn't thought about the diner camera. He thought the old man kept it off to save electricity. Video? Ryder asked, his voice losing its bluster. Vance held up the USB drive. 4K video, audio included. It shows my son doing calculus. It shows your officer harassing him. It shows your officer destroying his property. It shows your officer assaulting him while he was compliant. and it distinctly shows that there were no drugs found during the illegal search. Vance took a step closer to the chief. Now, Chief, you have a choice. You can back your man, in which case I will name you as a co-conspirator in the federal lawsuit and the DOJ investigation I just launched. Or you can release my son immediately, drop all charges, and suspend Officer Voss pending an internal affairs investigation. Ryder looked at the USB drive. He looked at Voss, who was starting to sweat through his uniform. Ryder was a politician. He knew which way the wind was blowing. Harlan, Ryder said quietly, did you find drugs? Be honest with me. I smelled them, Chief, and I found residue, Voss stammered. Residue isn't a baggie. Sloan pounced. You said baggies earlier. Voss froze. He had tripped over his own lie. Bring the boy out, Ryder ordered Thorne. Chief, you can't, Voss started. Shut up, Harlan. Go to my office and sit down. Don't touch anything. Don't talk to anyone. As Voss stormed off, humiliated, the door buzzed again. Kai walked out. He looked small. His hoodie was torn. His face was swollen. A nasty bruise blooming across his cheekbone. He was cradling his wrist. When he saw his father, his composure broke. Dad, he choked out. Vance was across the room in 2 strides. He wrapped his arms around his son, careful of the injuries. He held him tight, feeling the boy shaking. The anger in Vance's chest was a nuclear reactor now, hot and contained, ready to power a war. I got you, Vance whispered into Kai's hair. I got you. It's over. He said I had drugs, Dad. I didn't, Kai sobbed. I know, Vance said. He looked over Kai's shoulder at the empty hallway where Voss had disappeared. I know. Vance pulled back and looked at the chief. This isn't over. This is just the opening statement. He guided Kai out of the station, Sloan flanking them like a bodyguard. As they stepped into the cool evening air, Vance looked at his phone. He had 3 missed messages from his team in Quantico. He opened the first one. It was a preliminary financial report on Harlan Voss. Subject, H. Voss. Assets exceed reported income by 400%. Multiple cash deposits structured under $10,000. Recurring payments from Oak Haven Sanitation, LLC. Vance smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Voss wasn't just a bully. He was dirty, and Vance had just found the loose thread that would unravel the whole sweater. The Reid residence was a fortress of calm usually, but that night the dining room table was covered in laptops, tablets, and file folders. Kai was upstairs, asleep after a visit to the ER. A sprained wrist, a deviated septum, and a concussion. He would heal, but the trauma would stay. Vance intended to make sure the scar on Oak Haven PD lasted even longer. Sitting across from Vance was Special Agent Lila Ross, a forensic accountant who could find a missing penny in a billion-dollar budget. She had flown in on a private charter Vance had paid for himself. It's sloppy, Vance, Lila said, tapping her screen. This guy Voss. He thinks he's smart because he uses cash, but he buys toys. A boat registered in his brother's name. A vacation condo in Florida paid for by an LLC that doesn't exist. He's living on a policeman's salary but spending like a mid-level executive. Where is the money coming from? Vance asked, sipping black coffee. Protection, Lila said. I cross-referenced his arrest records with local business permits. There's a pattern. He harasses businesses, bars, diners, repair shops. He issues citations, makes arrests for minor infractions. Then a week later, those businesses start paying a consulting fee to a shell company called Blue Shield Security. Extortion, Vance said. Classic racket, Lila agreed. But here's the kicker. He's not doing it alone. The deposits for Blue Shield Security are split. 60% stays in an account Voss controls. 40% is transferred to an offshore account in the Caymans. Who owns the Cayman account? Lila grinned, the thrill of the hunt in her eyes. It took me 2 hours to crack the shell, but I got a name. Vance Ryder. Vance sat back. The chief. So the chief isn't protecting Voss because of brotherhood, Vance mused. He's protecting him because Voss is his bagman. Exactly. If Voss goes down, he flips on the chief to cut a deal. The chief knows that. Vance stood up and walked to the window. The pieces were falling into place. This wasn't just about a bad cop having a bad day. It was a systemic cancer in the town of Oak Haven. What about the drug angle? Vance asked. Voss was too eager to plant drugs on Kai. Why? I looked into that too, Lila said, sliding a folder across the table. Look at his arrest record for the last 3 years. Specifically, drug busts. Vance opened the file. He has the highest drug bust rate in the department. Look closer, Lila pointed. He busts out-of-towners, college kids passing through, people with no connections. But notice who he never arrests. The local dealers. In fact, there's a known distribution hub at the old textile mill on the south side. Voss responds to calls there 3 times a week but never makes an arrest. He marks it as unfounded or false alarm. He's clearing the competition, Vance realized. He arrests the small fry to keep his stats up and protect the local supplier who pays him. And when he saw Kai, Lila speculated, he saw a clear target. A black kid in a hoodie. He assumed Kai was competition, or a customer he could shake down. When he found nothing, he panicked and tried to frame him to justify the assault. Vance closed the folder. The fury he felt earlier had crystallized into something colder. Resolve. We have enough for a RICO case, Vance said. Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. We can take down the whole department. We need a witness, Lila cautioned. Paper trails are great, but juries like faces. We need someone who paid Voss, someone he squeezed. Vance thought back to the diner. The fear in Sophia's eyes, the way she said the owner was scared of Voss. I know just where to start, Vance said. The next morning, the sun rose over Oak Haven, casting long shadows. To the casual observer, it was just another Wednesday, but the sharks were circling. Vance drove back to Merriweather's diner. He walked in early. Sophia was there, looking tired. The diner was empty. Sophia, Vance said, taking a seat at the counter. I need to speak to the owner. Mr. Thorne. Sophia nervously wiped a clean spot on the counter. He doesn't like trouble. Mr. Thorne is already in trouble, Vance said calmly. He just doesn't know it yet. Is he in the back? Sophia nodded. Vance walked to the back office and knocked once before entering. Mr. Thorne, a balding man with a nervous tic, jumped out of his chair. Who are you? You can't be back here. Vance laid a subpoena on the desk. It wasn't officially filed yet, but Thorne didn't know that. Mr. Thorne, I'm Special Agent Reid. I know you pay Blue Shield Security $2,000 a month. I know you do it because Officer Voss threatened to shut you down for health code violations if you didn't. Thorne's face went grey. I don't know what you're talking about. I have the bank records, Mr. Thorne. I know everything. Now you have 2 choices. Choice A, you go to prison for bribing a police officer and participating in a racketeering scheme. Choice B, you wear a wire. You invite Voss over for his payment, and you help me bury him. Thorne trembled. He'll kill me. You don't know Harlan. He's crazy. He won't touch you, Vance said, leaning in. Because I'll be in the van outside with a SWAT team, and once we have him on tape, he's never seeing the light of day again. Thorne looked at the photo of his grandkids on his desk. He looked at Vance. Okay, Thorne whispered. I'll do it. Vance smiled. Good. Call him. Tell him his payment is ready. Tell him you want to give him a little extra because business has been good. Make him greedy. Thorne picked up the phone, his hand shaking. He dialed. Harlan, it's Nolan. Yeah. Listen, the cash is ready. Can you come by at noon? Yeah. Okay. Thorne hung up. He's coming. Perfect, Vance said. He tapped his earpiece. Lila, did you get that? Loud and clear, Lila's voice came through. Tactical team is 10 minutes out. We're setting the trap. The stage was set. Voss thought he was coming for a payday. He was walking into an execution of his own making. Noon in Oak Haven was usually marked by the sound of the factory whistle, a dull roar that signaled lunch. But today, the only sound that mattered was the static hiss in Vance Reid's earpiece. Vance sat in the back of an unmarked surveillance van parked in the alleyway behind Merriweather's diner. Next to him sat Special Agent Lila Ross and a tactical commander named Brody. On the monitors, they had a crystal-clear view of the diner's interior thanks to 3 pinhole cameras installed by the team earlier that morning. "Target is approaching," Brody announced, watching the street feed. "Unit 1 confirms Voss is in his cruiser. He's parking in the loading zone." Vance leaned forward, his eyes cold. "Hold position. Wait for the exchange. I want him to touch the money." Inside the diner, Mr. Thorne was wiping a glass so hard he was afraid it would shatter. He looked at the booth where he had left the envelope. It was thick, filled with marked bills. The bell jingled. Harlan Voss walked in. He looked relaxed, almost happy. The events of yesterday, the assault, the FBI agent, the threats, seemed to have slipped his mind. Or perhaps his arrogance simply wouldn't allow him to believe he was in danger. He saw himself as the king of this town, and kings didn't worry about the complaints of peasants. "Afternoon, Nolan," Voss boomed, sitting in his usual spot at the counter. "Coffee and a slice of that cherry pie. I worked up an appetite." "Sure, Harlan," Thorne said, his voice cracking slightly. He poured the coffee. "You having a good day?" "Better than some," Voss laughed, taking a sip. "Had a little headache yesterday with that city kid, but the chief smoothed it over. We lost the paperwork. Poof! Like magic." In the van, Vance's jaw tightened. "Did you get that recorded?" Lila confirmed. "Obstruction of justice, destruction of evidence. We got him." Thorne leaned over the counter. "Harlan, about the payment, I put a little extra in there, but I'm worried. That FBI guy, he seemed serious." Voss scoffed, waving a hand dismissively. "Let me tell you something about feds, Nolan. They come in, they make noise, they wave their badges, and then they leave. They don't care about Oak Haven. I run this town, me and the chief. That kid, he was just another thug. I taught him a lesson. Maybe next time he won't be so quick to talk back to his betters. He was just doing homework, Harlan." Thorne pushed, following the script Vance had given him. "He was breathing my air." Voss snarled, the mask slipping for a second to reveal the bully underneath. "I don't need a reason to put a boot on a neck, Nolan. I am the reason." Voss stood up and walked over to the booth. He picked up the envelope. He thumbed through it, a greedy smile spreading across his face. "Atta boy, Nolan. See, you take care of me, I take care of you." Voss tucked the envelope into his uniform pocket. "The package is secure," Brody said in the van. "Green light. Green light." Vance keyed his mic. "Execute." Voss turned to leave the diner. He reached for the door handle. Crash. The front door didn't open. It was kicked in. 2 FBI SWAT operators in full tactical gear burst through the entrance, rifles raised. "Federal agents, don't move." At the same moment, the back door flew open. 2 more agents rushed in. Voss froze. His brain couldn't process the shift in reality. 1 second he was rich, the next he was surrounded. His hand instinctively twitched toward his service weapon. "Do it!" one of the operators screamed. "Give me a reason." Voss looked at the laser sights dancing on his chest. He slowly raised his hands. Vance Reid walked in through the front door. He wasn't wearing tactical gear. He was wearing his suit. He walked past the SWAT team, past the stunned customers, and stopped 2 feet from Voss. Voss looked at Vance. The recognition hit him like a physical blow. The color drained from his face, leaving him a sickly shade of gray. "I told you," Vance said softly. "I told you to get a supervisor. I told you not to touch my son. And I told you I would dismantle your life." Vance reached into Voss's pocket and pulled out the envelope of cash. He held it up, soliciting a bribe, extortion, racketeering, aggravated assault, deprivation of rights under color of law, and conspiracy. Vance nodded to the agents. "Cuff him." As the agents slammed Voss against the wall, much harder than necessary, perhaps fueled by their disgust for a dirty cop, Vance leaned in close to Voss's ear. "You like being the bully, Harlan. You like making people feel small." The handcuffs clicked tight. "Welcome to the food chain," Vance whispered. "You're not the shark anymore. You're the chum. Voss was dragged out of the diner, kicking and screaming that it was a setup, that he was innocent. But outside, the street was lined with people. Sophia had called her friends. The librarian Voss had harassed was there. The teenagers he had bullied were there. They watched in silence as the King of Oak Haven was stuffed into the back of a federal van. But Vance wasn't done. Unit 2, Vance spoke into his radio. Go for the chief. Across town, Chief Vance Reid was packing a bag in his office. He had heard the radio chatter. He knew it was over. He opened his office door to run, only to find Derek Sloan standing there, flanked by 3 US Marshals. Going somewhere, Chief? Sloan smiled, a shark-like grin. I hope you packed a suit. You have a court date. The federal courthouse in the state capital looked less like a building and more like a tombstone for the corrupt. It was a monolith of grey stone and glass, surrounded on all sides by a sea of media vans, protesters, and satellite trucks. The story of the calculus assault had gone national, igniting a firestorm of debate about police overreach. The hashtag Justice for Kai was no longer just a trend. It was a movement, with people camped out on the courthouse steps holding signs that read, "Books not batons" and "Protect, don't predate." Inside courtroom 4B, however, the noise of the world was silenced by soundproof mahogany doors. The air was frigid, recycled, and heavy with anticipation. Kai Reid sat at the plaintiff's table. He looked different than he had months ago. The cast was gone, and the bruises had faded to memories. But there was a stillness in him, a loss of innocence that no settlement could buy back. Next to him sat Vance, a stone statue of paternal protection. On the other side was Derek Sloan, who arranged his files with the precision of a surgeon preparing to amputate. Across the aisle, Harlan Voss sat slumped in his chair. The swagger was gone. The tight uniform had been replaced by a cheap, ill-fitting suit that bunched at the shoulders. He looked smaller, pale, and sweaty, his eyes darting around the room as if looking for an exit that didn't exist. Beside him, former Chief Vance Reid stared at his hands, a broken man who knew the ship had already sunk. The trial had been a grueling marathon. The jury had seen the video. They had heard Sophia's tearful testimony about how terrified she was. They had heard the audio of Thorne agreeing to the bribe, but the climax came when Voss took the stand in his own defense. It was a Hail Mary pass, a desperate attempt to humanize a monster. It backfired spectacularly. Derek Sloan approached the witness stand, his footsteps echoing on the parquet floor. He didn't shout. He didn't pace. He simply stood there, adjusting his glasses, looking at Voss like one might look at a smear on a microscope slide. Mr. Voss, Sloan began, his voice dangerously soft. You stated in your direct examination that when you approached Kai Reid in the diner, you felt, and I quote, an imminent threat to your safety. Is that correct? Yes, Voss said, his voice raspy. He licked his dry lips. He was big. He was wearing a hoodie. I couldn't see his hands at first. In my line of work, split seconds matter. Split seconds, Sloan repeated, nodding as if he agreed. Let's talk about those seconds. Sloan clicked a remote. The massive screen above the jury box flickered to life. The video paused at the moment Voss turned his back on Kai to lean against the counter. Right here, Sloan pointed. This is seconds after you engaged my client. You have just turned your back to him. You are leaning against the counter. You are ordering coffee. You are exposing your spine, your kidneys, and the back of your head to this imminent threat. Voss shifted uncomfortably. I was de-escalating. De-escalating. Sloan raised an eyebrow. By drinking coffee. Tell me, Mr. Voss, if you were in a cage with a tiger, would you turn your back to sip a beverage? It's not the same. It is exactly the same. Sloan's voice suddenly cracked like a whip, causing the jury to jump. If you truly feared for your life, your weapon would be drawn, your eyes would be locked on the target, and you would be calling for backup. But you didn't do that. You ordered a dark roast. Sloan took a step closer to the witness box. You turned your back because you knew he wasn't a threat. You knew he was a child doing homework. You turned your back because you didn't fear him. You turned your back to show him that he was nothing to you. Isn't that the truth? You weren't afraid, Mr. Voss. You were bored. Voss stammered, sweat dripping down his nose. I made a judgment call. You made a mistake, Sloane corrected. No further questions. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. When they returned, they didn't look at the defendants. That was always the tell. The foreman, a middle-aged schoolteacher, stood up, her hands trembling slightly as she held the verdict sheet. In the matter of the United States versus Harlan Voss, she read, her voice gaining strength. On the count of deprivation of rights under color of law, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of aggravated assault, guilty. On the count of witness tampering, guilty. On the count of extortion, guilty. The guilties rained down like hammer blows. 14 counts in total. Voss closed his eyes, his face crumpling. Ryder was found guilty on 8 counts of conspiracy and racketeering. The sentencing hearing, held 2 days later, was the final nail in the coffin. Judge Patel, a woman known for her fair but iron-fisted rulings, peered over her spectacles at Voss. The courtroom was dead silent. Mr. Voss, Judge Patel said, her tone icy, you were given a badge, a gun, and the public trust. These are sacred things. Instead of a shield, you became a sword. You terrorized the very people you were sworn to serve. You broke the body of a young scholar because his existence inconvenienced your ego. She paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. There is no greater tyranny than that which is perpetrated under the shield of the law. I am sentencing you to many years in federal prison. Because of your background in law enforcement and the nature of your crimes against a minor, I am recommending you be housed in a maximum security facility. You will not be eligible for parole until you are an old man. As the gavel banged, a sound like a gunshot, Voss broke. The hammer of Oak Haven began to sob, a high, keening sound of utter despair. No, it was a mistake. You can't put me in general population. They'll kill me, he screamed, grabbing the table. 2 U.S. Marshals, massive men who had no sympathy for a dirty cop, hoisted him up by his armpits. They dragged him out of the courtroom, his feet dragging on the floor, his screams echoing down the hallway until the heavy door slammed shut. Karma hadn't just knocked. It had kicked the door in and burned the house down. Spring had finally come to Oak Haven. The snow had melted, revealing a town that felt scrubbed clean. Changes had rippled outward from that single moment in the diner. The Department of Justice had purged the Oak Haven PD. A new chief, a reformer named Mia Vance, had been brought in from Chicago. She walked the beat. She knew people's names, and she fired anyone who showed a hint of the Voss attitude. Merriweather's diner was packed. The smell of bacon and fresh coffee filled the air. Sophia was humming as she poured refills, looking 10 years younger now that the shadow of extortion was gone. In the back booth, the same booth where the nightmare had begun, Kai Reid sat with his father. Kai was scrolling on his phone, looking at dorm room layouts. You okay? Vance asked, watching his son carefully. He knew the physical wounds had healed, but he watched for the flinch, the hesitation. Kai looked up. His eyes were clear. Yeah, Dad, I'm okay. Actually, I'm better than okay. He slid a heavy cream-colored envelope across the cracked table. Vance picked it up. Stanford University, School of Engineering. Accepted, Vance read, a smile breaking across his face that lit up the dim booth. Full ride. I was thinking, Kai said, leaning forward. I want to study structural engineering. I want to build things that last, things that don't break when you put pressure on them. Vance laughed. A rich, deep sound. That sounds perfect. Outside the window, a police cruiser rolled by slowly. It didn't speed. It didn't lurk. The officer inside gave a friendly wave to a woman walking her dog. Kai watched the car go. He didn't tense up. He didn't panic. You know, Kai said quietly, for a long time I thought that day was the end of my life. I thought I'd always just be the kid who got beat up by the cop. And now? Vance asked. Now, Kai said, taking a bite of his cherry pie. I realize it wasn't the end. It was the tuition for a lesson I needed to learn. What lesson is that? Kai looked his father in the eye. That the truth is heavier than a badge, and if you stand your ground, even the giants fall. Vance reached across the table and gripped his son's hand. Damn straight, kid. Damn straight. Somewhere in a concrete box, Harlan Voss was staring at a blank wall, realizing he had many years left to think about the calculus student he shouldn't have touched. But in the diner, the sun was shining, the coffee was hot, and Kai Reid was ready to fly. And that, my friends, is the story of how one arrogant mistake toppled an entire empire of corruption. Harlan Voss thought his badge made him a god, but he forgot that a badge is borrowed power. It can be taken away just as easily as it's given. He tried to bury a seed, not realizing it would grow into a tree that would crush him. It's a powerful lesson about resilience, about the bond between a father and son, and about the undeniable fact that when good people stand together, tyrants don't stand a chance. I want to know, what do you think? Was many years enough for what he did, or did he deserve more? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We have a lot more stories coming about karma serving justice ice cold. Until next time, stay safe, keep your cameras rolling, and watch your